What's up, guys? Welcome to your 114th Android tutorial for the new Boston. Again with me, Travis. What we're going to do in this tutorial, we're going to set up 20 new variables and just get them going. And I'm just kidding because we're done setting up variables. I know we've set up quite a few and you're probably like, what is going on? But we're done with the variables. No more. Now we're just going to reference them. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up this onCreate method within our our database helper class. And this is basically going to create our database for us. So let's just get into it. We're going to learn a little bit about SQL programming. Not much though, but a little bit. So the first thing is when this onCreate method gets called, it gets passed in a SQLite database called DB. And we're actually going to access that database and execute some SQL code. So how we're going to do that is we're just going to reference the database that's being passed in called DB, and we're going to use a method called execute SQL. As you can see, it takes a string. So we're going to click that, and basically we're going to write some SQL code here. So we're just going to hit enter a few times, or delete that and hit enter a few times. Open up our bracket and close it off here. So what we want to do is we want to set up our database, and how we do that is we use the command called create table, because again our database is going to be a table. So we're going to, within quotations, we're going to say create table, create space table, like that, and then we're going to hit space. You guys have to follow along pretty closely here, make sure everything's accurate so the SQL can be executed. So we're going to have this command called create table, and then what we're going to do is we're going to reference our basically our table name. So our table name was called database table right here. So we're just going to say database table, database underscore table, and then we're going to hit plus, and then quotations again. And we're going to hit a space because again our database table is like just like that, so we want to have a space there, and then we're going to hit open parenthesis sign. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set up basically the columns within our table, and we have 3 columns. We have one for our row ID, we have one for our name, and one for our hotness. So I'm just going to hit plus here and hit enter down to the next row there. And how we set up our columns now is we're just going to say key underscore row ID, and then we're going to hit plus. And basically how SQL works is we set up our our column, and then we tell it what kind of column it needs to be, what type of variable that is, what we're working with. So we're going to say plus and then quotation space, and we're going to say integer. So integer, and because our columns, even though it's defined as a string up above here, basically we're going to use this as an integer because it's going to be row 1, row 2, row 3, etc. And what we also want to do is every time we enter a new row, we want to add 1 to the row ID. So it'll be like row 1, 2, 3, etc. And we do that by saying primary key, because this is basically how we're going to access all of our rows by the whatever number it is. So it's going to be the primary key, and we're going to say auto increment, comma, space. So there we go. We set up our first column, and it's our row ID, and it's going to be an integer with the primary key that we're going to look for later, and it's going to auto increment. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And now what we're going to do is we're going to say we're basically going to set up our second column. So again, you had a comma, space, in quotations, plus, and then we need to set up our second column, which we called key underscore name. And then again, plus, quotations, space, and we're going to say text, because it's just, instead of string, SQL use text. And we're also going to say not null, comma, space. And basically that's going to say, it's going to be a text value of some sort. So again, we're going to hit plus and set up our last column. So that was called key hotness. And again, plus, quotations, space, and this is also going to be a text and not null. We could have had this set up as an integer because again it's on a value 1 to 10, but you know, I'm just going to convert it into a string because it's a little bit easier, and you know, whatever. So we're going to reference that as a text or a string if you guys want to think of it that way. And we're pretty much set up. We've pretty much set up all of our columns. So we need to end quotations or end our parentheses right here. So we're just going to add that after our null, and then we just need to hit our execute statement right there. So there we go. That's basically going to set up our database. And there we go. We're pretty much done for this tutorial. We've set up our database because we're getting a database passed in, and we're executing some SQL code, which is going to create a table called our table name, and then it's going to, you know, within parentheses we're going to add all of our columns. First column is going to be just an integer that's going to increment automatically, and we reference that with our key row ID. Our name, we also is going to have a text for our second column, and our third column is going to be hotness. So there we go. We've set up our database within our onCreate method, and I'll catch you guys in the next tutorial where we'll set up some more stuff for this database. So have a good one.